So, part two of our elements of handicapping is class. And we're going to evaluate each contender for the Belmont based upon class. And these are the factors we look at. First and foremost, we're going to look at pedigree. Now, this is a little different animal than normal for the Belmont. Pedigree obviously means quite a bit at a mile and a half. Mile and a quarter, not quite as much. So there's not quite as much emphasis on pedigree as there would be if it was at a mile and a half at Belmont. We've seen a lot of these run before, so some of them we know can get the mile and a quarter. Some of them we're not so sure. So that's something we'll look at. We're going to look at prior race form. Now, that is in conjunction with form, but the difference being is this time we're going to grade the level of races that they ran in. So that has a big bearing on what kind of class a horse has coming into a Triple Crown race. We want to see if who he's been running against. And then finally we have progression. And as you guys know by now, that's a kind of a subjective number we put in there for the potential to move forward or regress. And it's all on a +2, -2 system like we did for form and like we do. It's pretty self-explanatory. Excellent is +2, poor is -2, and then the in-betweens. And, of course, progression works the same way. So that is how we're going to evaluate class. So we'll look at Seize the Gray first, and we'll see that on pedigree, I don't think it's going to be a problem at all for the mile and a quarter. I don't think it will be. He is the nice thing I like about what he's been doing so far is Wayne Lucas has been slowly stepping up the distances. So he's gone from a mile to a mile and 3/16 to a mile and a quarter, and in good form. So I think that bodes well for him. Now, the Preakness I didn't think was the greatest of fields. It was okay, and he obviously won it, so he gets a +2. But the Preakness itself for the field is a +1. The Pat Day Mile I didn't think was a very good field, so that gets a -1. However, Seize the Gray won it, so he gets a +2. And then the Bluegrass was a very good field, but Seize the Gray didn't do terribly well in it, so he gets a -2. Now, this should tell us one thing, is that Seize the Gray certainly is a horse who's getting better. The race levels for the last couple haven't been the top, so that maybe is a bit of a concern. But I think Seize the Gray is running well right now, and I fully expect him to have another good race. He's whether or not he can take this field wire to wire remains to be seen if they try that tactic. Seize the Gray is capable of rating as well, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We'll just have to see. Progression-wise, I'm a little reticent to give him a +2 just because he has run quite a bit recently, much like Mystic Dan. But the difference being, I think, Seize the Gray is more suited for these classic distances, and excuse me, I think his form is good. So we put everything together. We grade the races out, and they come at a +2, and then we add the race form. It all comes together for a +6. So now we come to resilience. And as we mentioned, Belmont did note after the Derby, he wondered if a mile and a quarter was a distance that resilience necessarily wants. I thought he ran a very good Derby, and his pedigree says that a mile and a quarter shouldn't be a problem, but, Belmont knows a hell of a lot more about it than I do. So I think he is showing confidence, certainly, that he's running in the race. But it's just a little thing there to think about. So pedigree-wise, like I say, I think he's got two-turn pedigree all day. I thought he ran an excellent Derby, ran a good Wood Memorial against kind of a subpar field, and an average Risen Star in what was a very good rendition of that race. So he gets a +5 for a level of competition he's been running in, and that overall, with everything else, even with a -1 for progression, he gets a +9. So now we come to Mystic Dan, our Kentucky Derby winner. And, there's been no secret. I'm not the biggest fan of this horse. I will give him credit. for winning the Derby, but he does not have pedigree that screams 2 turns or classic distances. And yes, he has won the Derby, and he did finish second in the Preakness. He got an excellent ride from Brian Hernandez in the Derby, but I think the Preakness was more indicative of telling you that 2 turns at classic distances is not necessarily what this horse wants. The Preakness, he had every chance in the world to win that race, and he couldn't do it. He is a horse with talent. He's a horse with speed. He's a horse with some class, and that's keeping him in these races. But as I've mentioned, going 1.25 miles, again, a distance he doesn't necessarily want, I have to believe that eventually it's going to catch up with him, and I think it will in the Belmont here. So that's why he gets the -2 for progression. He has fooled me before. He may fool me again, but I don't think so this time. So you put all that together, he gets a +4. The Wine Steward. This is a horse, you got to love him. He's a hard-trying horse. He has the pedigree to get 1.25 miles, and I don't think the distance is going to be a problem. You see in races that are a little bit above average, he's been run his race, and he's been second, unfortunately, the last couple times. It always seems that there's a horse who's better. I think he'll do it again in the Belmont. He's going to run his race. He does. He fires every time. It probably isn't going to be good enough, so he works to be more of a horse you want in the gimmicks, a fringe player, if you will. At 15-1, he does offer some nice value. So if you can get him into the trifecta, or even perhaps the exacta in second place, looks pretty good. So overall, for a horse who's a hard trier, but just seems a little not quite fast enough, you got to give him a good score. He gets a +7. Antiquarian is one I think is on the come. He's on the way upward. He certainly has the pedigree to get the distance. He is definitely moving in the right direction. There's no question about it, and that's why he's going to get the +2. The Peter Pan was a little bit above average, not a great field, and he ran an excellent race. You do note in the Louisiana Derby, which was a better field, he broke through the gate. We can give him a pass on that to a degree, and he didn't run badly, flattening out late, and that may have been attributed to the fact that he broke through the gate early. So, Antiquarian, I think, can probably run in this class if he takes another move forward, and he looks like he will do that. So he gets a +8. Dornoch, what can you say? I mean, I'm just not high on this horse, and I think he does have the pedigree, certainly, to get 1.25 miles, being the full brother of Mage. But the unfortunate thing is, if you look, every race he's run in that's been top class, he has not factored at all. The Fountain of Youth was a bad race, and he did win it, but it took him he had to work a little harder than we thought. All in all, I think that basically what it comes down to is Dornoch is just an overrated horse. Can he run a little better than the Derby with some time off? Sure, it's possible. But I'm really, I can't see using this horse whatsoever. I think a 0 is, I probably, if I could find a way to give him a negative, I probably would, maybe a -1 when you take away the +1 for progression. But not a horse coming into the Belmont, in my opinion, in very good form. So now we come to Protective, and this is another one. He is a career maiden. So, that it's kind of hard to back a horse who hasn't won a race yet going into a Grade 1 at 1.25 miles. However, he certainly has the pedigree to get 1.25 miles. I thought he ran a nice Peter Pan, and I think overall he has shown that he is getting progressively better. And I think that's the most important thing to think about. Now, in recent works, he hasn't looked like he necessarily is in the class of some of the better horses here. But I think he will run a better race. I think he'll take another step forward. But what it looks like is he's probably doesn't have the top end to really factor in this race. However, could he get underneath in the gimmicks? Absolutely. I think he's in that type of form. And I think class-wise, while being a cut below, I think when some of the others are perhaps backing up, he can get into the trifecta. and at 20 to 1, that offers some really good value. So +6 for protective. Now we come to Anna Marie, and I loved Anna Marie for the Derby, and he ran, I thought, a good race, but it just, he did have some trouble. He has been in the better races all the way along, the Louisiana Derby, the Risen Star, so he gets a lot in terms of the competition, not running away from anybody, facing the better horses, and he's acquitted himself pretty well. The Risen Star is first off the layoff. He got a -1, but once he got himself together off the bench, he did run pretty well. Louisiana Derby, I thought he ran is equally good as Catching Freedom. And in the Derby, again, he encountered some trouble, but was able to get up for 8th. So this is a horse that I think it's potentially possible that he can run a big one. I'm just not sure his top end is there. That's what I'm kind of seeing with Anna Marie. He's going to get a +2 for progression. You see, he's been in the top class races, and he's done pretty well, so he ends up with a +12 as far as class goes. But as a win candidate, not quite as certain, but we'll talk about that in speed and pace. So we come to Sierra Leone. He's the favorite at 9 to 5. The pedigree, no question about it. He wouldn't be a $2 million purchase if he didn't have great two-turn pedigree. He is a +2. I thought he ran a good Derby. He was his own worst enemy, no doubt about it. And if you wanted to downgrade that to maybe a +1 level, I wouldn't blame you. But I think he ran well enough, and he just that paddling action is going to continue to be a problem. This is another one who hasn't run away from a fight. He's running all the best races, so he gets +2s for all of those, and he's run very well, winning the Risen Star and the Bluegrass and second in the Derby. So a lot of class here. I think it's the fact that he didn't run in the Preakness. He's had enough time. The 1.25 mile distance meets him between the eyes. The only question I have is about the late running style and the paddling action, but I think it's this horse certainly belongs in this race and is probably the best class-wise of all of them so far. So a +15, and that is the best score. So now we come to Mindframe, the new shooter, and this one is kind of he's a bit of a wild card, maybe not as wild as some others, but he's only had a couple of starts, so a little hard to evaluate from that perspective. He certainly has the pedigree, so he gets a +2 there. Now, the optional claimer effort around 2 turns, his first effort there, he did regress a little bit speed-wise, and he won from the front end, and he did it like a good horse should. And that was the thing that I took away from that race. He didn't beat very much. And when we talk about his pace fractions, you're going to see some extremely unrealistic numbers. And he definitely will not get that candy a ride again in the Belmont. So therein lies the question. It's very hard to evaluate Mindframe from class because he hasn't run in a stakes race yet. And this is why a lot of times I do not like taking maidens as win candidates going into a stakes race. This horse is working up a storm. He's clearly got talent. There is no doubt about that. But we don't know how he handles competition. And if all we need to do is think about fierceness a little bit in some of the races that he has the Kentucky Derby where he didn't show up. There may have been some other factors there. Maybe he's not the greatest example, but this is a big step up in class, and if he passes here, I think we've got a major horse on our hands and a really good candidate for the Travers and some other glory later in the year. Right now, he gets a +6, and I give him a +1 for progression. And more than anything else, it's because we haven't seen him at the graded stakes class level. But I think there's clearly some talent here. So overall, we'll take a look, and we'll see that Sierra Leone and Anna Marie are the tops in class. And that's mainly because of the level of race they've run at, the class of race they've run in the best preps for the Derby and the Kentucky Derby. And that certainly impacts the score. You look at Resilience as another one who has running in the Derby, certainly running in a better race, would help the score. Antiquarian also. Now, Dornoch is really the only one who has, I guess you'd call 0 a negative. It is the lowest number, let's say. And it's really because he just hasn't done any running, although he's running some very good races. So this is, again, an instance where the horses who have been running longer in the year and running at the higher class races are certainly going to get a better score because they're battle tested. And that would explain it if anybody had a wonder about that. And then certainly horses who are on the come and look to be improving are going to get good scores as well. So that's class. From that perspective, you'd have to like Sierra Leone and Anna Marie. I don't have quite as good a feeling about Anna Marie as I did for the Derby, but we'll see what speed and pace bring. So there's our second part of our elements of handicapping. We're going to have speed and pace forthcoming, so be on the lookout for those, and we'll have a lot of other content for this festival of racing that looks to be a really exciting 4 days at the Spa. So stay tuned, and thanks.